Hello audience. In this video, we pretty much finish assembling the body on this thing. Now, in order to get all these panels to fit, we did run into some pretty bizarre problems, and some of them called for some pretty bizarre solutions, but we did get the job done. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you each part individually, whereas when I was putting it together, I was working on everything at once. So it's probably going to look like it was edited out of order, and that's why. Anyway, let's get started. And now we're ready to throw the deck lid on and see how it fits. Or how it doesn't fit, and how we're going to fix what doesn't. Alright, I've been working on fitting this thing. And one thing I'll point out is when the back panel isn't here, it's real easy to adjust the hinges, because it's an absolute nightmare to do otherwise. So this is the better side. The gap was a bit tight around here, so I hammered it back, and it's looking okay right now. The gap across the top is actually, pull it up into place, it's not bad. It's a little more open on the left side than the right, but it's usable. Over on the left side, we have some serious problems. Now, as I've said, the quarter panel's got more curve in it than it should. Now we've discovered the deck lid actually has less curve in it than it should. It has less curve on this side than the other, which doesn't make much sense because this is the side that got hit. Anyway, we got to figure out a way to put more curve in this, and then we'll adjust a few other things, and then we'll put it back on and try aligning it again. Well, that was easy. It matches the other side now. Now, I did end up putting a slight kink in it right here, but that's easy to fix. If I fix it at all, it's not visible when it's done. But like I said, they match now, so I'll try fitting it again. And that looks a lot better now. Fits pretty good. The quarter panel's still a bit out of shape, but it's not bad. I just hammer this around a little bit and it'll be pretty good. Now, when I installed it this time, I tried to get the gaps more even. Yeah, it's still not perfect, but they're a little more consistent. It was really tight up here and kind of loose down here. So I got them kind of parallel, and we got this new problem. The gap up top, it's pretty wide on this side and not much on the other side. Now, we've discovered one thing. Now, this was pushed up during the collision. Hammered it down a little bit, but this part has actually been ground down a little bit because the metal's splitting apart. So this was too tight on this side apparently, and somebody tried to fix it by doing that. Now, I'm not sure what I'm going to do to fix this just yet. I'll figure out something, but the rest of it is looking really good. And the distance between the deck lid and the rear crossmember is the same on each side. So I'm not worried about the back panel. I'm going to get everything else to fit and then modify that if needed to make it fit. So overall, it's looking pretty good now. Now, this is quite interesting. Now, because this is a bead, when you hit it this way, it opens the gap, but it also pushes the bead up a little bit. And to close it up, you do the opposite, just hit straight down on it, and then it moves the metal over, and closes it up. Now, luckily, so far, everywhere where the gap has been too tight, the bead has also been too low, so I've been able to fix both problems at once. Now, one thing I'd like to point out is on these, sometimes people align these so the deck lid is level with the bead. Now this bead is supposed to protrude like it does on this side, so the deck lid should be lower than the bead by the same amount it is on this side. Now the left side, where the quarter panel had too much curve in it, it's actually fitting pretty well right now, which is good. I was wondering how on earth I was going to fix this, and now it's looking like I don't have to. So now I've just discovered the new back panel is about 3/8 of an inch too high. So I need to figure out some way to shorten this thing. The good news is it's even all the way to the other side. So I spent a few days figuring out what I'm going to do with this, and I decided what I'm going to try to do is this flange on the bottom. I'm going to straighten it out, straighten the bead out, and then bend this back where it should be and roll a new bead in it. At first I thought of just undoing this and lowering it, but the problem with that is, first of all, this inner brace is already spot welded in. I'd have to remove that. Another thing is this seam right here is actually really nice. I don't think I could pry this up and bend it back down in a different location and get it this smooth. And this part of it is really visible when it's done. And that fits a lot better now. This was actually easier to reshape than I thought. So it still needs a little work, but now it's time to install it permanently. So now it's time to install these. And it gets riveted down here, and it was spot welded here originally. Now these rivets, I'm just installing them with hand tools, using a ball peen hammer and a dolly. Now, some of you are probably thinking, you could do a better job with an air hammer, and you're right. It'd be less effort, but this will still get the job done. And now there's this rivet, which, like I said when I was patching this thing together, I didn't emboss this, so I planned to just make a shim, and that's what I did. It will go there. Now, I don't have a rivet long enough to go through all this, and I learned from working on the other side, it's really difficult to hold the rivet from here while you hammer it over. So, I'm just going to take the easy way out and install a machine screw and put a nut with a lock washer on the back. Yeah, it's not authentic, but it will work. Now, looking inside the back panel, there's supposed to be this brace that goes here that supports the bolt, the top one for the spare tire carrier. Now, I went through the trouble to dig the old one out of the wreckage, but there's a few problems. First of all, this support right here has already been welded in, so you can't get the rivets in it. I could just weld this in, but it's also got a lot of rust and undercoating and who knows what else on it. So I just made a new one. And just weld that in and it should work just fine. And now I'm working on the alignment with the rear body panel. Now, where it meets the deck lid here, if this were a conventional trunk, we could make it line up perfectly, but because it's a rumble seat, the angle at which this opens, this goes down pretty far when it opens, as you can see. Now, because of that, this gap either needs to be really big, or this panel needs to stick out slightly so they don't touch when it opens. And I chose to make it stick out slightly. Now, up top here, what I ended up doing is I added a small bead of weld across here to build this back up. So now it's not split apart anymore. And I cut out a strip of 16 gauge steel and just welded it to the edge of the deck lid across it and just kind of faded it out to the other side. And the gap is still a bit wider here than it is on the other side, but it's not that noticeable now, so it'll work. And this will be a lot cleaner after a little dressing off. Now for these hinges, there's this plate on each side that fit over a oversized hole so that you can adjust it. And it's got a nut back here, and when you tighten it up it locks it in place. Now the problem with this design is anytime you want to remove the deck lid, you need to remove this, which you lose the initial adjustment. So what I ended up doing was this outer plate, I just tacked it in with a little bit of weld up top. I wasn't too crazy about doing this at first, but I really don't want to try adjusting this thing after it's fully assembled and painted, and it's not likely it'll ever need to be adjusted again, but if it is, like I said, it's only welded up top. This can be pried off really easily. And now we'll start working on the floor pans. Now this is the seat riser that was in it. It's got some age to it, but it's still usable. Now, these sides have been replaced, and the unknown artist got to this thing too. There's a lot of brazing here. However, it is working. It is holding pretty good. The only thing is they didn't put a mounting flange on this thing. Not much of one anyway. So I'm going to trim this off, make a new flange, weld it on here, same thing to the other side, and then we can install it. Also going to try and straighten this out good as I can. And now the next thing to do is to try to fit this panel in here. Now, first problem is it's too wide. So I'm going to hammer on the ends of it and see if that'll help. Well, that's a lot better. Still quite a ways from fitting, but it's getting there. And I got it fitting pretty good now. Now, all these holes here, they were spaced apart about right to match this, but they were all over this way a little, which was strange. So I bashed this side in pretty good to move this thing over, and that worked. They all line up now. Problem is, after I got them all caught, now there's a huge gap here. Now that makes no sense at all, but it fits now, so I'll settle for that. The holes up front that line up with the seat riser almost line up perfectly, however, which is pretty bizarre, but again, I'll settle for that. So next, I'm probably going to drill these holes out oversize to make the screws easier to install, and I got to figure out how to countersink these so the screws don't stick out. And I'm probably going to hammer these down on both sides so they're pretty tight with the sides, and I got to drill holes for the bolts. Now, normally, if I want to countersink a hole in a piece of sheet metal, I'll put a socket behind it and hit it with a punch. The problem is, the surface is curved, so if I do that, it's just going to flatten it. So I made this. I took a hex head nut, just because it was all I could find, and ground the surface of it so that it's curved. And I set it against here and hit it with a punch, and it seems to be doing the job. Well, that's it for this video. Now, since we have to repaint the entire back of this thing, and this is going to look fresh and new, it's going to stand out from the rest of the car, which is showing some age, so the owner decided, let's just repaint the whole thing, which is what we're going to do. So now this car is completely apart now, and it's going to be here a while. I'm not sure how long all this is going to take. The good news is, we did have to lift the body off the frame to get the aprons off, so we can also get a good look at the frame now, which you'll see in an upcoming video. I'm not entirely sure what else we're going to do with this thing or how long it's going to take, but when it does get finished, you will see it here. So, thank you very much for watching. Like, dislike, comment, subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.